Hello and welcome to Sunday Politics, coming to you live from Channel TV studios in the nation's capital. I'm Terry Ikumi. Tonight, the Minister for Arts and Culture, Hannatu Musawa, has been in the news in the past few days over the National Youth Service Scheme issue. Now, according to a statement by the Director of Press and Public Relations at the NYSC headquarters, Eddie Megwa, the minister is indeed a core member. And today, the Punch reports that the Minister, Hannatu Musawa, has said that she is a core member, but insists that she has not broken any part of the laws of the National Youth Service Corps. So let's talk about the legality or otherwise of a serving core member occupying the position of minister. I'm joined by Kayode Adeluola. He's a senior advocate of Nigeria. Welcome to Sunday Politics.
Thank you again for having me.
So I think you're familiar with what's happening in the public space. Interestingly, we have this with Kemi Adeosun, quite different. I'm sure you'll explain the difference in both of them. But then it's been confirmed that she's indeed a serving core member. And then the NYSC Act does state that people above 30 can be exempted from performing the scheme. So amid the allegations of whether or not she's legally allowed to be a minister while serving as a youth corps member. And then there are those concerns as to what she did before abscondment as claimed by certain persons and all these put together. What do you make of the circumstances surrounding the Minister of Arts and Culture?
Thank you. With the Minister of Arts and Culture, currently, she's a youth corps member, as we understand that she has admitted that. But in addition to that, we understand that she had been called up in the past, I think 2001, to serve, and she didn't complete it. I don't want to use the word abscond, because you see, then that suggests that there has been some wrongdoing. I do not know under what circumstances she started and didn't complete it. Now, there are people who are complaining about the fact that she is a youth corps member and she is right now a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Now, the question is there any wrongdoing? And that's what I believe people are interested in. Once you graduate from a university or a polytechnic, the law demands that you serve the nation as a youth corps member, provided you are below the age of 30. So let us take the words NYSC, National Youth Service Corps. You must serve the nation. So you cannot be serving in the United Nations or somewhere in Geneva. You must be serving in Nigeria. And then you must be youthful. You must be a youth. So you must be less than 30. Then the question is, what is service? I think that is where we should really we should really focus. There are people who during the service year are poor village teachers. They go to the villages to serve as teachers. It's acceptable. There are those who serve in local governments. That's also acceptable. There are those who are privileged, who are posted to the central bank, to Shell, to Chevron, for youth service. And aside from the stipend they get from the NYSC, they get additional remuneration. Some of them get very good accommodation and what have you. Now, it looks to me that what we are complaining about here is the fact that Mrs. Hannatu Musawa has an appointed minister. Now, is that employment? Because if you do not have your NYSC certificate, you shouldn't go into an employment. Now, would you define being a minister employment which attracts pension, which attracts promotion, which attracts the nuances of an employee? And who's a high employer in this situation? Is it Mr. President or the Federal Republic of Nigeria? And would you consider being a minister's service to the nation? See, these are issues that we actually need to consider to determine whether she has actually flouted the law. Now, if she already has a place of primary assignment, and in addition to that, she's minister, would it be different if she had a place of primary assignment and in addition to that, she was called up to be an enumerator in the process of census or she's called up to be, say, an environmental sanitation supervisor, would we have the same reaction? I don't think so. Now, she's a young person, clearly. She's been called up to serve as a minister. Are we now backtracking from the whole idea of not too young to rule? Otherwise, we're saying that once you haven't served, which means if you are still under 30, you must not be called up for national service as minister. You must not be called up for national service in such capacities. There's a young lady who is a student in one of the universities, who is on the committee of Mr. President for tax, I think it is. If she graduates at the end of this session, for example, and she continues to serve on that committee, would that be flouting the law? Let us.
But what does the law say? Because Hannatu has been speaking herself, and she says she hasn't broken any law. In fact, she points to the ruling of Justice Taiwo in a case in 2021 here in the Federal Capital Territory, which says that one is not required to present a first-degree certificate or any other certificate, including the NYSC certificate, to be appointed a minister in the country. So question is, this is her position. There's no law broken. Do you agree that she hasn't broken any law?
Quite frankly, I do not think she has broken any law. Because what the enabling law for the NYSC says is that you cannot have employment. And that is why I'm asking, is being a minister employment in that sense?
You don't think it is?
Honestly, it is, in my opinion, call to national service. But you see, we look at ministers as people who have privileges. She's going to have a special car, she's going to have an office, she's going to have perks that will come with it. We don't regard it as actually giving up herself to national service until when we begin to see ministers, and they also have a responsibility to demonstrate to us that they're actually serving and that we're not serving them. If we begin to see that they're actually laboring to make our country better, we begin to appreciate them. But as I said, the responsibility also lies on them to demonstrate that it is not mere employment, it is actually national service. And in this situation, well, maybe NYSC then needs to call upon her employer to withdraw her appointment as minister, or we should challenge the National Assembly that actually took her through the grilling of determining whether she was qualified or not before she was confirmed minister. But I think employment would, in my opinion, be anything that would be regarded in terms of labor laws, employment and employer relationship, where you're talking about pension, or you're talking about promotion or what have you. But if someone is called up, for example, let us imagine that whilst she had her primary assignment, she became regent of a throne of a traditional ownership somewhere. Would that also regard employment as employment? Because then the local government will be entitled to pay her some stipend as an Oba or what have you.
You know, we can point to precedent, which is, for example, the Senate in 2020 rejected her nomination by President Muhammadu Tinubu, I beg your pardon, President Muhammadu Buhari, who had wanted her to be a national commissioner representing the Northwest in the National Pension Commission Board. And the Senate rejected her nomination that she had not presented an NYSC exemption certificate.
She had not presented an exemption certificate and she had not served.
But that's the same thing now. She has no exemption certificate and she has not concluded the process.
You see, there goes many sides to this argument. Right now she's serving. She has not been accused of absconding right now. And then Mr. President calls upon her to have...
No, but she was initially accused of absconding. I recall that even she said that in 2021,
yes,
in 2001, she was supposed to be serving at the time, but she could not complete the exercise at the time, and she had to redeploy to Kaduna State for family reasons. And the reports that we get say that the NYSC had said that she absconded from the scheme at the time, meaning that the processes for redeployment or disengaging from the service or deferring that service at the time were not followed. So abscondment is a case. And now the process of whether or not she is legally allowed to run this NYSC is not clear yet.
Now, if she absconded at the initial stage, that's soon after she graduated in 2001, we'll consider that to be some infraction, let's put it that way. Then she represented herself, and she was accepted by NYSC. So she's a bona fide youth corper as we speak.
So you know that for the youth service, as you had initially mentioned, there must be postings for primary assignments.
Yes.
As it stands now, we understand that she's supposed to be doing her PPA, as they call it, in a law firm. And now she's a minister. The Human Rights Writers Association questions how she can do both. You call one service, and it requires full attention. And that's why I don't think there's any law that permits ministers to do anything other than serve, as you have said it, during the time of their appointments.
But as I said to you, and I'm not trying to be semantic here, as I said to you, if you consider being a minister service to the nation, it is service. It would be different if, for example, we heard that she became the general manager in some oil company or in a manufacturing company. Then we're asking, what are you doing here? So, the federal government has 50% shares in this company, so I'm actually representing the company. That will not make sense. But serving as a minister, she could serve as a minister for 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years at the pleasure of the president. So it looks to me that she has a primary assignment and she has a second one. Not many of my colleagues will share this view, but a minister is, in my opinion, national service.
Not an employment or appointment, as you put it?
So. Well, you could call it
in terms of these appointments, they get paid from the government coffers. And they're not paid stipends.
In the same way, when you send a youth corper to some companies, what they give to them is way above...
No, this is not what the companies pay. Youth corps members are paid by the government. Stipends. Ministers are paid by the government, not stipends. So if we bring the context of employment or not, as you raise, you think that youth corps members and ministers occupy the same sphere?
We have to make up our minds. What are we complaining about? Is it the fact that she's a minister? Is it the fact that she's earning income? So you see, there are many areas to break down. And I'm saying, if she had simply received another employment in some local government as a sanitary inspector, no one will be speaking here. If she has simply received another appointment somewhere in a school in her village.
Your points are tentative. We could look at what could or could not have been.
Sure.
Or we could just focus on what is at this moment. And the concerns of Nigerians is that, is this something that is legal or not? Can the minister be serving as a minister, have a place of primary assignment as a corps member at the same time? Is this a legal thing? As a senior advocate of Nigeria, compare this to the Kemi Adeosun case and say what's different, because Kemi Adeosun had to leave the position eventually.
Well, with Kemi Adeosun, she's gone to court. They'll be able to get some ruling or the other. And in her own situation, she had an exemption. Someone came back and said the document wasn't this, that, So it's totally different. In this situation, here we have a lady who was serving. Mr. President summoned her, sent her to the National Assembly for clearance. She was cleared. It's one of two things. He said, Mr. President, I'm a youth corps, as you well know, I will not serve in your government. So she could do that. Or, if we feel so aggrieved, we could go to court and say, Mr. President, you have no right to appoint someone who's serving the nation to serve you and serve the nation in another capacity.
You know, the thing is, precedences will be set with what happens from here. And that's why it's indeed right to get a clear understanding of what is happening. But does it bother you? Does it bother you that the requirements for high offices like that do not include NYSC certificate or discharge or exemption certificate, including political office holders? However, for regular jobs, you need NYSC certificate. Does it bother you?
You see, it doesn't bother me, and I'll tell you why it doesn't bother me. The President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria only has to have a school certificate. So if you say that a minister must have NYSC, it means that a university graduate only university graduates or polytechnic graduates can be ministers. There's something lopsided about that. The employer only has to have a school cert, and then the minister must have a university degree. That's what you're going to be saying in essence if you say that the minister must have NYSC certificate. Not necessarily. We saw some of those who came before the National Assembly for their clearance. I'm not putting anybody down, but many of them didn't even qualify to go for youth service because they didn't have university degrees.
So that's my question. Is that okay? Or is it something that should be addressed?
I'm not talking about what is okay. I'm talking about, let's talk about what is.
What is something we can't run away from. But should we continue in that path or should we make adjustments? That's the question.
It looks to me that as Nigerians, we have a responsibility that most of us shirk from. We need to start speaking to those who represent us at the National Assembly. Now, if this situation goes on and we're unable to address it to conclusion, then those of us who feel sufficiently aggrieved about it should speak to our House of Rep members or senators and say, we think you should sponsor a bill saying that anyone who is going to serve in the capacity as minister or commissioner, for that matter, in states, must have NYSC certificates, in which case they must be university graduates. And secondly, if you are a youth corper, you cannot take up superior assignment for the nation, no matter your competence and no matter the desire of Mr. President.
But should this not apply to the president as well? Qualification-wise?
It would be nice. It would be nice. Because, see, let us put our best foot forward at all times. We really shouldn't put a man who's going to govern a nation which is reputed to be the fifth largest, the largest economy in Africa. It should be the best. It should be the best that we can have in terms of comportment, education, character, antecedents, and what have you. So I actually think that we should begin to say that anyone who wants to be president...
Occupy public office.
Public office should have an equivalent of a training that's similar to what you get from going through a university training. But let's bear in mind the fact that there are those who have gone through some other form of training, which is not necessarily formal, but they're so enlightened, so versed in their own training that you can hold them to account. And look, there are people who are plumbers, for example, people who are vulcanizers. No, sorry, forgive me. They're people who are artisans, but they have learned the work so well. They have done so much training. They're able to impart the knowledge to other people, and they are masters in their own right, such that they contribute even more to the economy than those who have gone through university training. And I'm not putting anybody down, but let's call a spade a spade. I think anyone who wants to be the president of a country like Nigeria will have much more
than a school set.
I think so.
Very well, then, just before we move on to something else, I recall that the House of Representatives had attempted to amend the NYSC Act such that Nigerians schooling abroad would be given exemption certificates. And the reasons, or one of the reasons they gave at the time was that some of them out there get opportunities, scholarships to further their education, and they should be allowed to continue. Do you think that that's an amendment that is viable?
Now, let's not have separate rules for those who have and those who don't have. If you graduate and you have further scholarship for you to have further training and exposure and receive better skills, it's a good thing. But I think that should simply defer your NYSC. You shouldn't cancel it. I don't think you should cancel it. Everyone should have a role to play in the development of this nation. But then the NYSC itself needs a lot of recalibration, a lot of rejigging, such that there are people, I give you the example, some people will go for NYSC after the orientation camp, they receive posting to the place of primary assignment. They look at it and just smile. I'm not going to go here. They don't want to go there. So they get an uncle who's going to say, don't worry, I have a friend who works in, I don't want to mention names of companies, but who works in such and such a company. I'll get you there. And they get fixed. So they're not just youth corpers like the ordinary youth corper with whom they have.
Everybody's looking for opportunities, but beyond...
Yeah. But besides that, there are people who also, you and I know these things do happen. They sign up somewhere and they go abroad and they come back at the end of youth service year and collect the certificates. These are loopholes
It's a system that we built that we must address.
So that's why I said these are loopholes that we must cover.
Let's look at another aspect to this NYSC thing, because there have been many calls for it to be scrapped, saying that it's not fulfilling the purpose for which it was created, especially considering the state of the country right now, security-wise. Last week or thereabout, some corps members were kidnapped. We've heard about corps members losing their lives. What are your thoughts on the calls for the scrapping of the NYSC, or perhaps rejigging it in such a way that it will be more beneficial? Because one, the argument is that corps members don't entirely feel safe in certain parts of the country anymore. I know there are parents who have deferred postings of their kids because they fear for their lives. And then two, the actual purpose of the NYSC, is it being fulfilled at this moment, or what adjustments do we need to make?
See, there's no need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We need, like you said, let us put the NYSC back on the table and ask ourselves which areas are we not doing right, or what are the things that we're not achieving which we set out to achieve when we set out to have the NYSC as a scheme. True, I mean, I wouldn't want my children to go to places where I think they'll be unsafe. But then again, there are many places where people will feel safe to serve. Primarily, NYSC should give you an opportunity to serve the nation, one, and two, give an opportunity for interaction with people from other parts of the country. I went to school in Lagos, primary school in Lagos, Igobi College in Lagos, University of Lagos in Lagos. And so my very, very first opportunity to venture out of Lagos was when I went to youth service in Imo State, 1983-84. And I saw Imo State for the first time. I had the privilege of traveling to Port Harcourt also to see a few of my classmates who were serving there. I went to various local governments in Imo State, Idiato local government, Osina, I was in Uruala, all the way. So it gave me an opportunity. And believe me, the privilege I had of serving in that kind of place, because it was so far away from home, still lives with me. And I'm grateful that I had that opportunity.
How long ago was this?
This was 1983.
Compare that to now. Do you think that Nigerians still feel that the way you felt serving? Do you think that the feeling still exists now? And perhaps ask why.
At the time I served in Imo State, 1983-84, I had people also who didn't want to serve.
Okay.
So what we experience now is not new.
Except the security aspect.
Except the security. I have people who went to serve in Maiduguri at that time, and their parents had to virtually summon them back home. Look, NYSC is over, so what are you still doing in Maiduguri? Dad, I'll be back next week or next month or thereabout. So we had a way of enjoying whatever it was that was thrown at us at the time. But don't forget that now, NYSC serves as a buffer for a lot of people after graduation, before they start seeking employment. Now they get out there, they've graduated, they go for NYSC for 1 year. It's an opportunity for them to earn some income, no matter how small it may be, whereas they're now asking themselves, how do I face the cold world out there?
So you think the scheme should remain as it is?
I think not as it is. The scheme should remain, but let us look at areas that are not serving us the way it should.
Do you have specific areas that you think
like I said,
should be addressed?
You and I know that we need to have a method of ensuring that we engage. Engaging, if you're from Ogbomoso, you should be able to go to Anambra State and serve there and feel at home. And we have seen people who have gone to some states and have come back home with wives.
Okay.
So these things do happen, and we should encourage to that extent.
All right.
But then again, if there are areas that we need to rejig, let's do so.
Let's go to the issue of palliatives now, considering the removal of fuel subsidy and the government's efforts to address the matter. Now, they say that the idea of palliatives may not be the best. We may not have made the progress we expect to make, or the government may not have reached where it expects to reach. But the question is, the idea of palliatives from the point of view of the government and its effort, the federal government specifically, do you commend it? Is the government moving in the right direction?
What's the essence? Palliative is supposed to cushion the effect of the...
As it stands now, fuel subsidy removal.
Fuel subsidy. Yes, okay, well, we're hiding on the fuel subsidy, but a lot of people have been hungry before fuel subsidy. Okay. Now, the truth is, if we're going to give any palliatives at all, there are things we must get right. One, who are those who are entitled to the palliatives, and where shall we find them? Thirdly, what are the modalities for distributing? I don't want to see my competitors having food thrown at them like beggars. It's not a good thing.
So the two things you mentioned, who are those that would benefit? You think that it is not clear who will benefit from the palliatives of the government?
I don't think it's clear. Now, when I say it's not clear, there are people who are in the villages who are able to provide produce from the farms. There are those who are in the cities who cannot do that. They're also unemployed. Some are unemployable, some are underemployed, and then some have lost their employment. No fault of theirs. Those are people who desperately need help.
But you don't think the government knows that? I was speaking with the special advisor in media to the president, and he says that of course, you know that the social register has been questioned and it's been kept aside for now. But he said that the state government have their own sort of register and mechanisms through which they can reach the poorest of the poor. You don't believe that that system exists?
I can't answer that question in truth, because I don't know how any state, I don't know when last we had the census, and people are very fluid. Go to Lagos, for example, which I'm very familiar with. There are people who live in Ilubiri, there are those who live in Makoko, there are people who live on stilts on the water. What are their addresses? How many of them live there? How many of them lived there last month? How many are there this month? Do we have their names? But it's possible to actually have these details because we are divided into local governments, into streets, into neighborhoods. We can actually, it may not be very accurate, but we can make an attempt.
But then with the non-existent local government, almost non-existent local governments, how is that possible?
Non-existent? We do have local governments.
Well, there are states that that they are not active.
They're not active.
There are states that there are no local government chairmen.
Well, those, you see, we would always have problems in various areas and aspects of the endeavors we want to put forward, either by government or even as citizens. We still have local governments. I'm talking about in terms of the area, land mass. So we know those who live here. We can determine. It might be difficult in some of the very large cities, but in the smaller towns, you'll be surprised that every market has the name of those who have stalls here. They know their names, they know their houses, they know the number of children they have. It might be informal, but those things exist. We need to start getting ourselves clearly identified and identifiable. If a child registers in a school, who's a mother, who's a father, where do you live, how many siblings do you have? And in the world of computers, if you impute these things in the computers, with BVN, with people voting and what have you, we can actually capture the details. But the question is, are we ready to do so or not? If we actually make the effort to capture details of our citizens, it will become easy. When somebody dies, you know, oh, so-and-so person died, so we delete it. If a child is born, the child is registered. But unless we want to make use of technology, make use of satellites, which can also be used to determine how many we have, we'll continue to pretend as if we're not sure who lives where and how many people deserve these palliatives. But unless we know who deserves the palliative, it's just going to be a shot in the dark.
What do you think the census will do with regards to addressing these concerns that you've raised? Because it's been pushed forward every now and then, and as we speak now, there is no date for it.
You see, census is not about head count. Census, that's why when they come to your house, they ask you for details, name, address, your schooling, what have you. So it's getting details from people. But see, then again, sometimes we as citizens also make it difficult. Someone lives in Lagos, they sign for census, he goes to his state. When they count those in Lagos, they count maybe 15 million. After the census, he comes back with his family. So there are maybe 20 million people. Then the state is shown 15 million people as a result of census. Government is trying to provide hospitals for 15 million people. And then the facilities are overwhelmed. That happens in most parts of the country. And then in some places, the culture wouldn't allow you to go inside a room because the wives are there, so you can't go there to count. It becomes very difficult. But having said that, let us count the ones we can see. Let us have the details, the statistics, and impute in computers so that over time we can tell that 3 years ago we had so many people, and over a period of 1 year or 2 years, given the rate of birth, plus or minus, we have another percentage in addition to it.
You know, someone said something to me that if our death and birth registrations were accurate, it would be easy to have head counts in the country if they were accurate. But beyond that, let's go to the issue of the palliatives now. Let's conclude on that. Do you share in the sentiment of those who feel that the state governments should not be in charge of the distribution of these palliatives? Already, we're seeing videos on social media, unconfirmed, but you have also said you don't like the way these distributions are made. And I believe that is because you have some information about the ones you've seen. So state governors not properly handling these palliatives, especially the ones that have just been released by the federal government now. And also there are states that say that till this moment we haven't seen. And I recall, I think Osun State said they haven't seen theirs. So there are concerns as to the politicization of this whole process. But in all, bearing in mind that there are governors who poorly handled COVID-19 palliatives, do you share the sentiments of those who don't think that the federal government should hand over palliatives to state government? It may be late already because that's already been done. But then, if that's your sentiment as well, how else should the federal government carry out the distribution?
You see, we have the hangover, and I mean no disrespect, we have a hangover of the military rule that we have experienced for so long, which was a unitary kind of government. So there's this tendency for all of us to tend to look at Mr. President to be the headmaster in charge of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We just spoke about local governments now, and you said even in some states, the local governments are not even there. But so the truth is, the palliatives should be distributed through the local governments. They are the ones who are close to the people. They're the ones who can tell, so-and-so, you were here yesterday, you can't come here again today. Not Mr. President, not the ministers. The state governors are far removed from them. You send palliatives to a place like Oyo State. I think he knows who collected in the same Oyo, Ibadan. It's going to be very difficult.
You know what? Let's go on a quick break. When we come back, we will conclude this conversation and move on to our next discussion. So please stay with us. Sunday Politics. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sunday Politics. Now let's move on to another conversation. A federal government delegation led by the Minister of Defense, Mohammed Badaru, on Saturday discovered an illegal oil connection in Abia State, or Waza to be precise. The NNPC, on its part, estimates that the country loses about $7.2 million monthly from that illegal connection alone, which was discovered. Meanwhile, the NNPCL, through its social media handle, says it recorded 240 incidences pertaining to crude oil theft and pipeline vandalism in the Niger Delta in 1 week, and 93 illegal connections, 69 illegal refineries. Some of these illegal refineries and pipelines discovered were located in Ukpata and Abua in Rivers State and Bokoda in Delta State. Illegal refineries, as much as we know, simply translate into severe economic losses for the nation, and that is what successful administrations have been trying to address. But the question is, why has it proven almost impossible to stop illegal refining of crude in the country? Meanwhile, a statement from the Nigerian Air Force signed by Air Commodore Edward Gapquet, who is the Director of Public Relations and Information, says, in continuation of efforts aimed at containing the activities of terrorists, militants, and all the criminal elements bent on destabilizing the nation and making life unbearable to peace-loving Nigerians, the component of Operation Delta Safe carried out air interdiction missions on some illegal refining sites located at Kwothan Channels, Bile, and Gubokri in Degema local government area of Rivers State on the 27th of August. Having observed the sites to consist of illegal refining sites, the areas were attacked and destroyed, specifically at those two locations. And Gogokiri, Cotonou boast, observed to be loaded with illegal refining product and heading into open waters, was also engaged and destroyed. Now, similar strikes were carried out by the Air Force, according to that statement. So let's go talking now. I'm joined by Professor Wumi Iledare, who is an energy expert. He joins us virtually. Prof, welcome to Sunday Politics.
Well, thank you. Glad to be with you. Good evening.
Good evening to you as well. Now, illegal refineries discovered in Delta State, Prof. We have illegal connections discovered, seizures being made, all these happening at once. What does this tell you about the energy sector?
Well, it's so unfortunate. You cannot isolate one sector for the others. The economy is interconnected, and once there's a dysfunctional behavior in one, it affects the other part of the economy. So you could, just like if you have a hurting finger, even the smallest of your finger, the whole body aches, and we can see the implication over the years. All these illegal activities are really doing to the Nigerian economy.
Prof, all these discoveries, there are concerns as to why they have persisted. Some say that it's basically because of lack of prosecution. Do you agree?
Well, when you tolerate criminality in a society, you remember there was a time in this country in which armed robbery was actually very prevalent. And because of the consequences of being captured, it went away. To me, I think we have tolerated a lot of criminality when it comes to this particular oil and gas sector. I think we do not understand the implication of that. There are two components to it. One, the first one is asset insecurity, which is having a lot of implication on investment. The second one is life insecurity, and that makes recruiting competent people to come and work a little bit more difficult. And security is an important component of a global competitive industry like the oil and gas sector. I wonder why we are not having quite a lot of investment flow. Let me say again, we cannot continue to reward criminality. And this is where even community responsibility becomes so important. But if you have communities that are literally betting and abating this type of activities, it will take community to report illegality the moment they are discovered. Perhaps then maybe we need to look at our security personnel. To what extent are they compromised? It's just impossible for somebody to build a pipeline for that many years and nobody is able to detect it, and they're just detecting it now. Something is just wrong somewhere, and
Hello? I think we may have
anything.
Okay. We lost your last statements, Prof. I think you got interrupted by a call or something.
Yes. No, what I was trying to say is that it's a little bit worrisome if illegal behaviors has continued for this long and we couldn't do anything. That makes even our security as a nation questionable when we cannot solve mere ordinary people stealing crude oil year after year. What happens if we are invaded? Does it mean we're not going to be able to do anything about it? And I'm hoping that this government will really do something. But the community needs to just come to terms and understand that they are their own protector of assets in their community. I know people are not necessarily supportive of the host community bill or provisions in the PIA that actually says that the community will not receive anything if assets are destroyed. And I think it should be enforced.
Well, Prof, when you talk about communities reporting, we understand that in some cases arrests are made. But compared to the magnitude of oil thefts and the arrests and perhaps prosecutions, which we almost don't hear about, some say that we should probably have an agency that is saddled with the responsibility of prosecuting crude oil thieves. Do you agree to that, just as we have with financial crime?
Well, listen, let's go and try to evaluate the financial crime and see how much they've actually accomplished over the years. In fact, it has become more or less true. And I don't think creating another agency will solve the problem. Let us empower the people that are being saddled with responsibility. And I think, and I'm going to use a term that I use frequently, when you continue to obediency, their deliverability will be impeded. You need to think in terms of getting the right people to head some of those agencies. So creating another agency will not necessarily solve the problem. You just need to empower the current one and make sure that they are selected on the basis of competence and let go all of this idea of geopolitical.
Let me throw the same question to Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Kayode Adeluola, with regards to addressing the issue of crude oil theft as it concerns prosecution. Do you agree with Prof that we do not need an agency, specific agency saddled with the responsibility of prosecuting oil thieves?
Let's face it, we already have laws to take care of those who steal. Stealing anything for that matter. Whether it's oil theft, they are stealing a car or what have you. And if the police will do the investigation, all the agencies will do the proper investigation, and they will be prosecuted in the law courts. They will go to jail. But we must have enough desire to achieve those objectives.
But then there's also that allegation of culpability against the security agencies.
That is what I just said. We have to have the desire to achieve the end of justice. So if you have culpability, that means there's a break in the chain. And those are the people you need to deal with. Why should we have security agencies acting in connivance with thieves? Now, if you act in connivance with a thief, you're just as much a thief as he is. So we shouldn't have thieves in our security agencies. So that's the point I'm making.
Very well, then let's look at the federal government handling of the issue of illegal refineries now. Prof, illegal refining, crude oil theft, the federal government has decided, at least from the last administration, to have some form of collaboration with private security outfits. That's been criticized considering the caliber of the people involved. But in all, how do you assess the federal government's handling of this matter? Does it show the resolve of the federal government to bring an end to oil thefts in the country?
Well, let me quickly talk about refinery economics, and you are going to see the reason why illegal refineries are literally booming. And I've had people talk in terms of legalizing them. The principal cost affecting profitability of refinery is the cost of crude. And then you have all of these people getting crude for free, and even in the process, destroying the environment. There's no basis to even think about letting somebody, stealing somebody's assets to get scot-free. They should pursue them, arrest them, and put them in jail. Then you are going to see this thing will stop. The only reason why illegal refinery is profitable is because they are not paying for the crude. Apart from that, if you look at the components of the refineries and even look at taxes, look at distribution margin, transportation costs, what is left in refinery is just bare surviving. But let me again agree with the senior advocate. I don't know how much you are familiar with the Pipeline Act, which actually makes it a death penalty if you are found wanting breaking a pipeline transporting crude. To what extent has it been enforced? So again, the federal government has to actually let go of these security issues within the state and let the state take care of some of these issues because they know themselves and they can easily handle it more than imposing somebody from the center to actually enforce this type of thing. I think this is where, and I know this is inside politics, we may need to go back to this federal constitution and revamp it and go back to federalism, in my opinion. So every state will be responsible to take care of the security in its own, unless they invite the federal government to come and participate. When I was growing up, if I can tell you, if I live in a community and I'm living above my means, my community will not even allow somebody else to marry from my community. I think the system in itself has been polluted. Our value system has collapsed, and we must find a way to revamp it. And it's not going to be the politician that will do it. This is where even religious organizations to come to term and educate the polity so that people can become more morally responsible for their neighbors. What we have now is more or less extremely primitive, even in our governance system. People cannot provide security for people's assets. We need to go back and rekindle, rebrand, and restructure our security forces.
Prof, just as we round off this conversation, with regards to finding solutions to this issue of illegal refining of crude, the Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria believes that a partnership between the federal government and these illegal oil refiners could yield results and sort of address the matter. And it points to one thing. You recall the issue with illegal mining in the north, which many believe that the artisans there and the illegal miners should be absorbed into the system, and that could address it. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't. I don't, because illegal refinery is crude, doesn't have the technology. Now you could try to get them and train them, and that's the essence of introducing what we call modular refinery. Crude technology is not efficient. It does not allocate resources efficiently. And so we should not tolerate illegality or try to, and that's the problem we have. We tend to reward criminality. And that's why people look at criminality as a way to make ends meet. We need to punish people according to the law. The rule of law is critical if we want to go to the next level as a nation. But even ordinary stealing, cheating in exam, we penalize them. Why didn't we absorb the people that are cheating and try to innovate them? Prosecute to the extent of the law those people caught doing things that are illegal, that are actually polluting the environment, breaking environmental law, breaking security law, and breaking economic law. I do not agree with that at all.
Very well, then. I'd like to thank you very much.
Rewarding criminality.
Thank you very much, Professor Wumi Ledare, an energy expert. Thank you for your time on Sunday Politics.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Anytime.
So, Senior Advocate, just before I say goodbye to you, there's something that I think I should ask you, and it's a statement from the NBA president. Interestingly, the NBA conference is ongoing, and he's worried about how lawyers criticize court judgments. Some would say the Supreme Court judgment. And it would be good to get what you think about that, because we're anticipating certain court judgments across the country from election matters, and then specifically the presidential election. What are your thoughts with regard to criticism of court judgments as far as lawyers are concerned?
Let me put it this way. Every lawyer knows that there's hierarchy in the court system. So if you're not happy with what happens at the High Court, you go to the Court of Appeal, and then you go to the Supreme Court if you're still dissatisfied. And once a judgment is delivered by the Supreme Court, it's final. Now, it's not final because they cannot make errors. It's final because they are the final court. And we must respect that fact. The way we were trained allows us to have a critique of a judgment, but not to criticize the personality or the individuals who sat on the panel. It's just wrong. You may disagree with them, but they are the judiciary. And until when another opportunity presents itself to overturn their decision, it stands as the precedent. Other courts will follow. But I quite agree that the method of criticizing these judgments can sometimes be very wrong.
Okay. I'd like to thank you very much for your time. Kayode Adelola, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Thank you for coming on Sunday Politics.
Thank you for having me.
And just before we go, the personal statement from the Minister, the crosshairs of Nigerians now, the Minister of Arts and Culture and Creative Economy, Hannatu Musawa. She says that, according to her, the last couple of days have witnessed a barrage of media attacks and misinformation about me following my appointment and swearing in as Minister of Arts, Culture and Creative Economy. It is true that I am currently on the NYSC National Service, which I began 8 months ago as a matter of duty and devotion to my country, having been unable to complete the scheme since I was mobilized first in 2001. I started in mandatory national service as a corps member deployed to Akwa Ibom State in 2001. Upon the completion of my university education, I could not complete the service same year after my redeployment to Kaduna State due to family obligations. Despite this, it has been my personal resolve and commitment that I will always fulfill this national duty whenever I am opportuned to do so. I applied to NYSC to be mobilized again for national service last year. The NYSC graciously mobilized and deployed me to serve in Abuja, where I've been serving in the last 8 months before my current appointment as minister. I'd like to state clearly that, contrary to wrong insinuations and false assumptions, there is no breach of any law of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria regarding my status as minister and serving corps member. She goes on to say that it must be said that there is no law of Nigeria or any part of our Constitution and NYSC Act that states that a serving corps member cannot be appointed to be president of Nigeria or any other appointed authority into political positions. It's quite a lengthy write-up, but that's all the time we have for you today on Sunday Politics. Thank you for your time. I'm Terry Ikumi. Bye-bye.